I'm calling Clayton Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First, and as a new member, I'd just like to say that to be on the Select Committee, which has been taken a big part in helping put this new legislation together, it's been a great honour, and I feel very privileged to stand here today on behalf of New Zealand First. We would also like to acknowledge the people that are here in the House today. We've got Sonia Rockhouse, Anna Osborne and Deborah McMillan, who are themselves at the sadness of losing people in health and safety accidents. And we've also got some representatives here from New Zealand Fire Service. Mr McGarvey, it's great to have people here that care so much about their family members and fellow workers. Mr Chair, I think this new bill of 247 odd pages is well and truly overdue, and I'd also like to acknowledge the patience of New Zealand workers and their families for this bill to actually make it to the House today. There has been considerable amount of work, a lot of time has been given with those people coming to put their submissions forward from the public, and I also commend Mr Young, Jonathan Young, our Chair, for actually enabling us new members to actually hear from those submitters again, because joining this House only 10 months ago, we were very much as new members on the back foot. So thank you for that. I think he has done a good job of chairing this. And I've heard a lot of passion in the House today, particularly from Mr Ian Lees-Galloway and Sue Moroney, and it gives me great pleasure to speak to their passion that they hold so tightly. And there was some good, robust discussion in Select Committee with regards to putting this bill into place. But conversely, I'd also like to commend the Minister himself for his words, because somewhere in the middle between the passion and sincerity and what this government is trying to put together as a very prescriptive piece of legislation to reduce the number of deaths in our workplaces by 25% by 2020. Now, New Zealand First can stand here, we do stand here, to say that we 100% support the intent of this bill, but we cannot be supportive of this bill as it sits here in front of us today. And I'd like to talk to you today, Mr Speaker, about some of the unintended consequences of this bill that New Zealand First has some concerns about. And I'd also like to say that if we could get some of these some changes, they might be small in the amount of words that they take up and small in the number of pages that it requires to eloquently put what we're trying to say, but very, very large overall benefit for New Zealanders. And when we talk about health and safety in our workplaces, it comes really down to a three-pronged spear, where we've got workers or employees, employers, and of course governance that's overbodying that and the enforcement of that. And when you've got those three things in good, solid legislation, you're actually going to have a massive reduction in deaths and severe incidents causing major harm to our workers. And if I look at our current occupational health and safety bill legislation, two of those prongs have been missing. There hasn't been the support from enforcement and labour inspectors. They haven't been adequately funded. And of course, there wasn't anything in that bill that enabled worker participation. Now, just for the people back home that are watching this today, and those members in the House that haven't had the pleasure of reading this bill, like some of us have, there's some new terms coming in now. Employees are no longer employees, they are workers, just to keep it nice and simple. The employers have now become PCBUs, which is persons conducting businesses or undertaking. And that there in itself, I think, is a good thing. And I want to talk about some of the good things in this bill too, so that we're not going to sit here and throw stones at the government for throwing stones' sake. But the PCBU in any workplace enables multiple number of PCBUs, so that a variety of people are taking ownership of looking after their fellow workers and their employees, etc. And having that worker participation in that process helps build and change the culture of the she'll be right attitude, as Mr Scott earlier spoke to. Mr Speaker, I have to say one of the concerns that we've brought to our Select Committee, and one of the things that we would like to say, is that for every action there is going to be an opposite reaction, and that's Newton's third law. And that goes through life and just about in every single thing that we have an effect on. If you change something, something else will change. And what we've got an opportunity here today with this new legislation, and we'll be certainly putting some supplementary order papers through when we get to the committee of the whole House stage, to try and take off some of those unintended consequences, or as Newton said, the inactions of those actions. The first thing I'd like to talk about and bring to the people's attention is that 99% of New Zealand workforce is made up in SMEs, or small and medium enterprise. Now, quite a lot of engagement that we're going to have and we're going to see brought into play will have a serious impact on some of those businesses, particularly around those compliance costs. And when Sue Moroney mentions the fact that having a health and safety representative doesn't have any financial cost whatsoever onto the PCBU or the employer, that's not actually entirely correct. Because, of course, to have a health and safety representative, you first need to have a trained health and safety representative. And that comes at considerable cost to all businesses, but with an impact particularly on those small and medium enterprises, or the SMEs that everybody talks about in this House anyway as an acronym. What I would like to suggest, and we'll be certainly putting through a SOP to that order, and a question that was asked to the Minister in the House today was, will this government help fund those course costs, which could be up to a week, we don't know how long they're going to take and we don't know the cost of those courses, to ensure that those small and medium businesses aren't hamstrung by further costs. The concerns to New Zealand First is that we seem to be having an abundant number of extra compliance costs in your day-to-day life. And just let me bring some of those costs to your attention. And they're already in place now, and we can just see further costs coming in. For example, in the building industry, and where you've got a drill or an appliance that's got a cable to it, every 3 months, they have to get an electrician in to certify that cable, tag it and pass it on. And I know a small business in Tauranga employs a very small number of people, has spent $1,200 in the last 6 months just getting his certifications just for his tools. And it wasn't that long ago, it was only a few weeks ago when I walked into Placemakers and I looked at these people that were up changing a light bulb, and it almost reminds me of the start of a bad joke. How many people does it take to change a light bulb in New Zealand? Well, the answer is 1 and 99 other people to turn the building around it. Because what we saw in the middle of Placemakers was a scissor lift with 2 people up top, 2 people down below, 4 cones out there. They all had hard hats on, they all had safety goggles on, and it gets back to the common sense. You know, dead right, we are concerned about the common sense of this. Now, that's taking things to the next level, I have to say. We've got more to say on that. But we need to be careful that good legislation that we're trying to bring in to save people's lives in our workplaces is not actually brought into such an extent that it's hamstringing small business from moving forward, because they do employ 99% of the people that work in New Zealand. That is a serious concern. Another concern that we've got, it comes around those costs, is in section 28, which says no worker could be levied or charged for any PPE, which again, sorry to use the acronyms, is a personal protective equipment, by the employer or the PCBU. Now, we absolutely agree with that. That makes sense. That is common sense. If you've got somebody that needs to do a job, then they should have that equipment supplied to them, whether it be a hard hat or safety goggles. Where I don't understand where we've got the opportunity to fix this problem up is by simply putting in a codicil to section 28 and make it a section 28A, is make people, your workers, personally responsible. It's about personal responsibility to ensure that they look after and maintain that equipment that they've been given to them. Because there's nowhere in this legislation that enables a PCBU to charge a worker that has no regard for their health and safety equipment whatsoever. Now that, to me, and the Minister mentioned it earlier on today to say that can get picked up on some Labor and another bill somewhere else and some new legislation, but again that comes at a cost to those small businesses. The cost to get HR in to reprimand a staff member who's not looking after or not showing up with their health and safety equipment is further costs that needs to be looked at and remediated and sorted out. And we will be putting some supplementary order papers in to that effect when we go to the Committee of the Whole House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.